to Beyond the Headlines, where we share stories that are important to you. I'm Brianna Rittman.
And I'm Cameron Main. WMBD's Renee Skinner has been working hard on this special report and joins us now. Renee, good evening. It's not usual you come in. You're usually a morning owl.
Good morning, our morning anchor.
Right here in the flesh. I know, it feels weird.
We're honored to have you here.
Yeah, honored to be here with such distinguished journalists as yourself. It's so good to be here.
The
I'm
honor's
so
all
excited.
ours.
Yeah, oh, thank you. But it's so exciting to talk about this series that I've been working on. It's called A Culture of Hope. And it looks at just different topics involving youth gun violence in Peoria. And so basically, I called it the culture of hope because I just think that when you talk about gun violence, there is such negativity surrounding that topic as it is. So if you look at the opposite side of the coin, there is this reality of hope. There is this, optimism among activists. There is optimism among the police department that there is going to be a solution to the gun violence problem that Peoria has. And I wanted to just really look at both sides as we as journalists do. And so I hope the other side of the coin here, which is, we're talking about such a heavy topic, the other side of that coin is hope. And you could see the police chief right there at the stand-up, show-up rally that he had over the summer, where he called on all men to just come up and rally and support kids in the area because we had had a shooting around Manual High School around that time where a 15-year-old girl, I believe, was struck by a stray bullet. So that just shook the police chief. He was very bothered and frustrated by that. So we held this rally. And so I wanted to include that in the story as well, because that's so important to not only show that we have activists on the ground trying to tackle this issue, but we also have the police department who's solution oriented and trying to solve this.
And that was a big deal when that happened. I remember when, we heard the shots were fired, we were on the scene and we were talking about it. And especially from then, the chief has had these stand-up, show-up events that have been going on. And my question to me, from me to you, would be, tell us more about the people you spoke with and how why did you decide to interview them?
Absolutely. So each person in my story has an element of hope in their story, right? So I spoke to Jonathan Romaine. He's the creator of Art Inc. It's a nonprofit that helps guide and mentor kids. And he told me that he had spent time in jail himself, but was able to turn his life around through art and expression. And now he's on a path to help other kids. And then he introduced me to Antoine Banks, another young man who strayed away on his path when he was young, but got his life back on track. He's in charge of a nonprofit called Product of the Projects, and they put on this big back-to-school bash, I believe, every year for all the kids. So he also has an element of hope in his story. Then I found a teen. I went to the House of Hope, found a teen by the name of Sincere, which you're going to see in part 1, and he had anger issues, but he was able, through the House of Hope, get those anger issues under control and get his life on track. So each person in the story has an element of hope, and that's why, full circle moment, culture of hope. There you go. Yeah, wow. I rambled there for a little bit.
No, their stories are important
Very
to
much
share,
so. Absolutely.
Now, what is the overall focus of this series? What do you hope the viewers get when they see this?
Absolutely. So I'm hoping that our viewers, I didn't want to just put out a story that says, hey, Peoria has this gun violence problem. It's so bad. Here it is.
Right.
I wanted to also say, yes, we have this problem. Yes, it's happening not only in Peoria, but all over our country. And yes, there are people on the ground wanting to fix it. So that was the main theme just of the series. And I hope people took that away.
And that's quite a difficult thing to do. I know we can probably all speak to as journalists here that it is quite hard to do a story just outside of the numbers, outside of the injuries, outside of the press release, because it's so emotional. There's so many people connected.
Getting those human interest stories.
It's people that have been impacted and have their lives completely changed because of gun violence. And
for sure,
it's really hard to get people to understand that, hey, when we cover these things and we can get your side of the story, it matters. People care and they want to hear it.
Absolutely.
That can be very difficult, and it's really impressive you put this all together.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you really humanize the numbers.
I hope so. I hope so. And I'm hoping in part 2 we humanize more numbers because Yeah, part 2 is going to be a controversial topic. So, but
Okay.
we'll of course get to that, coming up.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a brief break here. When we come back to Beyond the Headlines, we're focusing on part 2 of our special report on youth crime in Peoria. We're looking at recent studies done on violence and a candid conversation surrounding gun violence. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. We've got Renee here to go into a detail of our special report focusing on youth violence in Peoria. Part 2, we're focusing on some recent statistics, which includes a candid conversation involving race when it comes to gun violence among juveniles. Renee, why did you decide to tackle race a part of this story?
Ooh, such a controversial topic. I know we're approaching, or we're about to discuss, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't talk about race when it comes to gun violence and our youth. The topic definitely came up when I was interviewing all the people you saw in part 1. Each person brought that up. So I just said, well, we've got to dive into it then, since everyone I've talked to is saying, look, this is an issue that disproportionately affects African American men. So with that comes hours and hours of research, right? As journalists, that's what we do. We dig for the story, we research the facts. And so I did a lot of that, and I found that, for instance, the Clifford Law Center says despite the fact that black boys and men account for just 6% of the total population, they comprise more than half of all gun homicide victims.
Wow.
Okay? That's startling. Then Brady, a gun violence prevention nonprofit, says black people ages 18 to 24 they are 19 times more likely to die by firearm homicide than white people in the same age category. And both these organizations, I found, they use data from the CDC, they use data from JAMA to come up with these studies that say, look, there is a glaring disparity. And so these activists are saying, yes, this is disproportionately affecting the black community here, and there are facts that support that. So then, when we dive deeper into it, the question then becomes why? Why is this happening? And so the activists, and you're also going to hear from a father. I'm really excited about this interview. A father whose son died by gun violence in 2009.
Wow.
The gunman was never found. He weighs in and he blames the fact that we have inequalities in education, health care, we have poverty. All those things are factoring into why his son lost his life to gun violence, a topic that we're talking about in this series. That's what he blames. So I had to bring that in, and I did some digging. And again, the CDC does recognize these disparities. So the point is the most vulnerable populations are going to be affected when you have disparities in education, in healthcare, in poverty, in the wealth gap, in all of these things. The most vulnerable populations are going to be affected, and that does not matter what color.
Right.
It does not. So that was the overall theme of this story, and I hope our viewers took that in too,
Right, so poverty was the biggest indicator of
Absolutely,
violence.
absolutely. So, just found a lot of data to support that. And so we also talked about the father that I interviewed. He had such emotion because, again, this has to do with his son. His baby boy, 19 years old, was shot and killed by a gunman in 2009.
Wow.
And just, he talked about how the system just failed the gunman, and it failed his son in essence, and that's what he believes. So this part of the story was definitely interesting, and it was definitely just a moment that I really had to take in and really wanted to include in this series. So, yeah. All righty.
Well, I think it's
Did I
just-
leave you speechless there?
Yeah, it's just
Those
so...
numbers were rather startling. Do you
Yeah.
have any more numbers to share with us? Any more stats?
I mean,
Or we got to watch the...
I think you gotta watch it.
Yeah, you
Watch
gotta
it. There
watch
you
it.
go,
Yeah,
Brianna.
yeah.
Sneak peek there. She's teasing it.
And I think as well, when we talk about kind of, again, like the human element, these aren't just people, this isn't just another news story. This
Right.
is someone, this is a father who's lost their
Yeah,
son. And
right.
you talk about it so deeply. And
Yeah.
it's just it would be so difficult to imagine that your life can be impacted in that kind of way.
Like a trickle-down domino type
Right.
effect. So, yeah, oof,
I
this is a
commend you
heavy
for
topic.
Taking on such a heavy topic
Yeah.
beyond us covering, hey, a shooting happened, and this is what the police chief is saying, or this is what the
Yeah.
police, what the number,
Yeah.
what's coming from the police department. You are finding these people impacted because, like Cameron mentioned earlier, these are families' lives that are changed forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Just shattered. And then in the part 3 of the series, just speaking to the family, you could just feel the emotion coming from them as they described what happened that night. I don't want to give too much of it away.
Yeah, we don't want to give it all away.
Let me stop, let me
No,
stop.
I'm pretty sure we'll cover it in a bit, but I think one of the biggest messages that we can take from part 2 is just that poverty does have an effect, and
Yeah.
if you can bring people up from society, if you can help raise that poverty, well, reduce the poverty
Poverty,
level, I guess,
absolutely. No, I
and
get
raise
you.
people out of poverty, that's one of the best ways
Giving them
to
more
reduce
Absolutely.
gun violence.
Right.
Agreed, for sure.
Well, when we come back to Beyond the Headlines, we're giving you a sneak peek to the third and final part that she just mentioned of the special report. We're taking a look at a cold case involving a family's relentless pursuit of justice.
Welcome back. We've been discussing our youth violence special report you only see here on WMBD, investigated by our very own Renee Skinner.
Hello.
Tonight we will add the last part 3 of that special, that takes a look at a cold case involving a family's fight for justice. Now, Renee, who are we going to hear from in part 3?
Right. So before the break, we talked about the father you saw in part 2, who's talking about the inequalities he sees and the inequalities that he believes ultimately led to the death of his son. So you're going to hear more from him about the investigation itself, about what happened that night. There is his picture right there. Mario McGee, 19 years old. Two people they broke into his home, and they shot and killed Mario during a tussle of some sort. And so his mother was at home at the time. It was just such a frightening scene for this family to go through. That's his father right there. You're going to hear more from him. And that's his aunt right there. She met me at the scene where the shooting took place. She's still holding on to hope. Again, that theme of hope. She still believes justice will be served eventually, and she's holding on to it. She has pictures just to keep his name alive. She has shirts printed out of the young man, so they're definitely holding on to hope. And so that's who I decided to interview in this story. Yeah.
Now, usually when we have special reports in crime, we see numbers, we see stats, and we talk to a few families. But this one is a little different because it's a family it's a cold case going on with their situation.
Right.
So why did you decide to include them in your series?
Absolutely. And I think it just falls along the lines, again, with that aspect of hope and just wanting to see change. And so we talked about that domino effect of all these disparities happening to a vulnerable community. And here is a casualty, if you want to think of it that way. This is a casualty of that. And so not only does the father blame the assailants who did it, but he also says, hey, look at this system that failed my son, that made it so that these men thought that they could barge into my home and take my son's precious life. So that's why I decided to include that in there. The father is just relentless in his pursuit of justice. He said that he's going to do everything he can to make sure his son's story stays alive. Even though his son's life was taken, he wants his story to stay alive.
And it's so interesting that you mentioned cold cases, because when I was reporting in the state capitol, one of the big bills led by Chicago Democrat Cam Buckner was a bill entirely focused on cold cases, because what happens is a lot of times when families will have years and years and years of not hearing anything. And the way to get any new information on that case is very, very difficult. So they'll call up. Obviously, they'll get mostly nothing out of it because they haven't updated the case. So there was actually a bill that was signed into law by the governor this session that would require quarterly reports on cold cases, and then allow after a certain amount of time, I don't remember the exact amount, but requiring a new person to look over that case to see if they can find something new or get a different angle. Because this is a problem, and it is very sad for a lot of these families that can't get closure because they're stuck on these cold cases that have killed their children.
Absolutely. Wow. I'm so glad you brought that up, because, you know, that's great that you have lawmakers trying to tackle that issue. But I was reading in the National Justice Institute, I believe, or the Institute of Justice, where, you know, it's not easy for officers to solve cold cases like this.
No.
And I hate to even call it a cold case, because the Peoria Police Department said, you know, we consider all cases to still be open.
Right.
So they responded, and they, you know, gave their side. But, you know, cold cases are really hard. The DNA evidence can, you know, wear over time. Also, it takes resources to solve cold cases. And a lot of times you have these small city police departments, you know, with one person for multiple reports or multiple cases. So a lot of that could be happening in terms of Mario McGee's case, the case that we're looking at tonight. So definitely there is a law enforcement aspect to it for sure. And it's good to see lawmakers trying to put a dent in the cold case issue for sure. Mm-hmm.
What else can we expect to see in this report?
Yeah, so you're going to see, again, just a lot of emotion. You're going to see, we tried to paint a picture of exactly what happened that night. Gosh, here it is. We went through, we went through just this 100-page police report.
Wow.
A lot of it is redacted, but the notes we were able to decipher listed the DNA evidence in the case, what the police officers found, who they spoke to. But again, a lot of it is redacted. So I really had to sift through and try and just piece together what, you know, happened.
Can I have a look at that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you also have to look at the family's point of view, the family's point of view. And I didn't print out all of it, Cameron. It's 100 pages. I didn't print out all of it. I didn't want to kill all the trees.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
But I did look through all the pages of just information, and I had to match what the family is saying happened that night too. So that was very interesting to compare and contrast what the police say happened and what the family says happened. So you're going to see that in the story as well.
Okay, what was it like for you covering this? Because you mentioned, like, in part one, you were talking to people, and then your part two idea kind of came up. What was most alarming? Did you expect it to be a 3-part series? Tell us
Would you like
about
the police report back?
Yeah. My makeshift police report here. But yeah, I mean, I was not expecting to talk about race. I knew it was going to come up, but I didn't think that was going to be the focus of part two of my series in particular. But definitely it was startling to do all the research and see all the statistics that was presented. It was also heartbreaking to hear just the family members of Mario McGee that you're going to hear from in part 3. That was I had to really step away and just gather my emotions, because as journalists, we often feel for the person we interview. You know, we're human beings too. So there was a lot of that going on. But also, again, I wanted to just mainly make the point that there is a culture of hope. You know, wherever we are in this society, whether it's Peoria, whether it's across the U.S., there is a culture of hope that is up against this culture of violence that is often plaguing communities across the U.S. and in Peoria. So, yeah.
All right, thank you for joining us, Renee.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem,
Thank you
anytime.
for joining us on the WMBD Plus app on Beyond the Headlines. You can find all these stories, or this story in particular, over on our website, ciproud.com.
For breaking news and weather updates 24/7, log on to ciproud.com and download the free CI Proud to Go mobile app.